TC Cassidy is an artist who may be known to some country music fans from a few years ago, but to others like me, her name is new, but her talent is not, and she has a rich history in country music, which I'll ask her about. Her latest single is Love, Hate, Love Again, and it follows Ain't Too Late to Start Again. I fluffed that up a little bit, TC. Please forgive me. Hello, lovely to talk to you.
Oh, you too, Sophie. Thank you so much for having me.
So as I said, you've got these two singles, Ain't Too Late to Start Again and Love, Hate, Love Again. And I have to say, it sounds like you had the time of your life recording them. There's this real joy in your voice. Was that the case?
Oh, absolutely. And we're almost at the finish line with the actual album. We're still absolutely having a ball. And I said to my husband only a couple of nights ago when the last few tracks came in of final vocals, what am I going to do now? We've had so much fun. And he's like, well, you just have to start writing for the second album, even though the first one's not released yet. But
well, it's never too late to start again. Never too early to start.
Right? Yep, we're on it.
Now, the central premise of Ain't Too Late to Start Again could apply to a few things, but in your case, it seems to apply to your music because you took quite a break from it 30 years. But given how your vocals sound on these recordings, I'm imagining you were singing that whole time.
Do you know what? You're right. I was. I even though it was a long break of being inactive in the professional performing scene with the country music, but I still remained active locally, performing in it was more a cover band, but it was country or country, like rock and country covers. So yeah, you're right. I never stopped singing as such. I just took a break, a 30-year one, from the professional performing side of things, it was a sense of familiarity to me still, though, coming back to it, because I was fortunate, or am fortunate enough, to have remained friends with a lot of the people in the industry. So it didn't quite feel like I was brand new coming back, so to speak. I'm just a lot older. And all these young ones up and coming, they're probably like, who's this old fart trying to make a comeback? But I'm loving every minute of it. And the response to the two singles so far, as you know, there's only been 2 released to date, but the response, I guess I didn't have any what do you call it?
Preconceptions?
Yeah, exactly. I thought, oh, we'll just see what happens. But the response has been overwhelmingly beautiful and makes me feel all warm inside. And a lot of people haven't forgotten me, which is like, oh, that's so nice.
Well, haven't forgotten you, and some people like me discovering you for the first time and really responding to that joy, I think, in the recordings. And also because you have such a great tone to your vocals. So from a music point of view, it's such a pleasure to listen to. And the songs are really entertaining. And I like to say that, you know, your country music artists, part of your job is to bring joy to people. So I think that's what you're doing on those songs.
Oh, well, then my job is done. Thank you so much. And I'm having a ball doing it. And I can't wait till the release of the album. We've got a release date, the 16th of September. And a lot of people are very curious as to what might be on the album. As you know, the first one was quite a Western swing feel with Ain't Too Late to Start Again.
Yeah.
And then Love, Hate, Love Again was different again. It sort of had elements, even a little bit of Cajun sounding with the piano accordion featured in it, little bit swampy and a whole lot of country. So there's different elements throughout the album. There's some power ballads. There's a bluegrass tune on there as well that was everything was written especially for me. If I hadn't had a hand in the co-writes, the writers wrote with TC in mind, and I think that makes a big difference to an artist, how they portray a song. Yeah.
So we should talk about your main collaborator on this album, who is Angus Gill.
Absolutely.
Golden Guitar winner of this year, and he knows a huge amount about music and about the Australian country music industry. So I'm wondering how that association came about.
So Angus Well, we live literally 10 minutes away from each other, so that plays a big part.
Yes.
However, Angus has mentioned on numerous interviews that he's done, and I do know this to be factual. He discovered my music around 10 years ago, I do believe, as he had a radio program on a local station in Wauchope called 2 FM. And so he used to play some tracks off my album back then, I believe, and was a fan back then. And then we bumped into each other quite a few times being local. And the last time was at the Glass House here in Port Macquarie. There was a Johnny Cash tribute show, right, which Daniel Thompson played Johnny Cash. And Angus and a mutual friend were sitting right behind us, the row behind us. And we got talking after the show, and he said, what are you doing, like, professionally with your music? I said, nothing. And I said, but I'm getting back into writing and I want to get back into it, but it's been so long. And he casually said, well, let me know, because I'm always up for a co-write if ever you want to get back into it. And I guess I was intimidated because I just getting back into the swing of everything, and I never followed up with it. And then I got a message from him a couple of months after. So that was June, that concert. He messaged me the following October, so 4 months after, and said, oh, how's the songwriting going? By the way, I think TC needs to make a comeback and I'd love to produce it. And the rest is history, pretty much.
Well, he does have such a like an in-depth knowledge. I think he's got an incredible memory, actually, because he just retains all this information about music and loves sort of the archaeology of music as well. So listening to older records and finding artists. So I can imagine it's been a really great experience working with him, because he's also so professional.
Absolutely. He's and it's not, I mean, Angus is known to most people as a country artist, which he absolutely is. But what a lot of people don't realize is that he's quite global with his genres. Perfect example, he's just come back from, or he did a songwriting workshop in Melbourne recently, but he caught up with, do you remember Mondo Rock?
Yeah.
The song Come Said the Boy, etc. There was another one, State of the Heart. So the writer, who was a member in Mondo Rock, the guitar player, I'm just trying to think of his name, Eric McCusker. Angus is on a project with him, and it's brilliant. So he's quite universal, and diverse is probably a good word to describe Angus as. He's not just, he's a brilliant country artist, and has released a beautiful bluegrass album, which is his last project. So which is brilliant, but he's just amazing and far beyond his years, like all of 24 years of age. It's like, how does someone know so much at such a young age?
Yeah,
but you're right, and the memory, and he's very good at what he does. And knew exactly what I wanted. When I first went to his house to discuss this TC project, I said to him, can we just sit down and have a big chat about everything? And so I pretty much said, like, what direction I wanted and the sound I wanted. And he said, TC, I reckon I know you. I've got it covered. And hopefully this album, it's me to a T. And I just hope that it strikes a chord with everybody that hears it when it's released. Yeah.
Does it feel a little uncanny when someone knows you so well? Like, this is, as you know, he's a young man. He's come to you through your music, and there you are sitting together having a conversation. Does it feel almost a little like I want to say otherworldly, but in some senses, you just feel like you've got to trust your instinct with someone like that who wants to collaborate with you?
And that took a lot, because I'm a very, I guess I'm a very particular person, and don't open up to a lot of people, unless I know them really well. But Angus seemed to just, I don't know, we're become quite good friends out. I mean, we were friends before. It's funny, I used to work in a gym here in Port Macquarie, and Angus was a member of that gym. I was on reception. And he said, he scanned in one day and he said, are you TC Cassidy? And I'm like, well, I was. This is going back quite a few years ago now. And that's where so he'd known of me as an artist, as I mentioned before, through playing my CD on his radio program. And then we just struck up a friendship, and I guess he just followed my journey locally and musically, of course, and it just went from there. But yeah, I wholeheartedly trust him in the journey. Yeah, he knows me to a T when it comes to direction and style, which is good. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely. And you said the album's out 16th of September, I think was the date you gave. And so that's not that far away. So I imagine you've recorded pretty much all of it, because you said you're still working on some of it, but most of it must be done.
Yeah. Well, I think a week and a half ago, we finished all the final vocals. So the band tracks, I'll backtrack a little bit here. The band tracks were all done in June. Oh, no, sorry, February, just gone, in Nashville with some, I was so blessed to have the players that we were able to get. They did all the 10 tracks in the one day in a studio in Nashville. And I only found out after it was recorded, one of my heroes, or one of my modern day heroes in America, is Miranda Lambert. So the album, the band tracks, I didn't know at the time. So for the record album, and let's get it, there was another album of hers, were both recorded at Soundstage Studios where my band tracks were done. But we didn't discover that till afterwards. So that was a bit of a buzz for me. Oh my God, my band tracks were done where Miranda Lambert recorded her albums. Yeah. So that was a buzz. And we finished the vocals. The last one was put down almost 2 weeks ago. So we're just at the final mixing stage. And a few guest artists are appearing in a collaboration as well. So they're yet to just put down their few little lines, but then it should be pretty much finished.
How exciting.
Yeah.
Now, one of the songs that will be on it is your new single, Love, Hate, Love Again. And I'm wondering if there's anything or anyone you have loved, hated, and loved again.
Every interview that I've done since that release, I always have to stipulate that it's not based on, it's nothing to do with my husband. I love him all the time. I always have to make that clear.
I'm sure he's relieved.
I'm sure it's a song, though, when it just seems very relatable to me, or for a lot of people. You know, you hear it a lot, like, oh God, I can't live with you, but I can't bloody live without you either. So it's sort of one of those love, hate, love again relationships, on again and off again. Yeah, so it's quite lighthearted. It's not a deep song or anything, but I just think it's quite relatable to a lot of people out there. Yeah. And I always dance every time I hear it. I'm goofy dancing in the kitchen. It's just got that really nice little beat to it.
It does. Yeah. And look, some performing artists might say they love, hate, love performing, you know.
Oh, absolutely. There's probably times where we have a gig that we regret, I'm sure, in our lifetime.
And speaking of performing now, I understand you started at the age of 10.
I did.
But to start performing at 10, you obviously started singing earlier than that. So at what age did your musical life begin?
I reckon I was about 4 years of age when I used to just sing along to TV commercials. One in particular, I can still hear it. The St. George ads, Julie Anthony. Do you remember Julie Anthony?
I do, yes, I remember Julie Anthony.
Yeah, well, there were lots of ads going on. And I used to just sing along to jingles all the time. And it was my auntie at the time who said to my mum, I reckon there's something there with that kid. I'll pay for the first few lots of singing lessons to see how she goes. And then if there's nothing there, that's all well and good, but I won't be satisfied until you take her to see if there's something there. Right. And from that day, I started at about 7 years of age with the singing lessons. I was about 4 when I was singing along to the jingles and everything. And from 7 years of age, I was doing singing lessons up until 16.
Right.
So 9 to 10 years. And part of that vocal, I had lots of different singing teachers because we moved from a different town to Port Macquarie.
Right.
But the last few years were classical singing lessons. Yeah, so it was a nice foundation. I guess you hear with a lot of dancers, regardless to what style, they'll often say that they started off in classical ballet. Similar with vocalists, a lot of vocalists will be classically trained and not necessarily stay with classical, but you know, you've got the foundation there. So I had a lot of classical training back in the day.
Right.
But it was interesting. I was 16 when I did my first album, and my producer at the time, Garth Porter, he said, TC, are you still having singing lessons? And I was. And he said, okay, I think you can stop now. And I get it. I totally get his reason. I said, why is that? And he said, because the classical is starting to come out in the training's coming out a little bit in your country singing, right. Which I totally understand that. Yeah. But now it's just typically me. What comes out of my mouth is wholly and solely wholesomely me. But I'm so thankful and no regrets with the classical training. It just teaches you like your breathing techniques and everything. Yeah.
Well, and I think that, as I said, your tone is so wonderful and your articulation is so crisp and clear. And I'm sure that that training had something to do with that.
Oh, thank you. I reckon it does too, to be honest. Yeah.
So you mentioned recording that album at 16. What was it like to record an album at 16? I mean, at 16, you're thinking about school homework.
I know. And it's funny. Back then, do you know what? I was actually 15 because I had my 16th birthday when we did the last track of the album, because I remember a musician friend came in with a sweet 16 birthday cake in the studio. So between 15 and 16, that album was done. I didn't actually, that was normal to me at the time. Like, since I left the industry and looked back, I'm like, oh my God, that so wasn't a normal childhood. But to me it was, because that's all I knew. I went from school. Mum and Dad used to drive me to Sydney every weekend to do shows in Sydney. Then I'd come back for school as a child, like in high school. So it was just a transition from finishing high school to recording the album. So I guess like I knew all these musicians in high places, but it was normal to me back then. And then, and in that time, that hiatus, I'm like, oh, wow, I was so lucky, but just took it all. Not that I took it for granted. That's not going to be the wrong term, the right term. But it just didn't seem out of the norm for me at the time, because that's all I knew. Yeah. But
what sort of shows what sort of shows were you playing on the weekend when you were coming to Sydney?
So they were pretty much like guest appearances at a lot of like just clubs. Like I'd be booked to do maybe a 40-minute set, and it'd often be on a Saturday night and then a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, and then travel home that Sunday for back to school on the Monday, pretty much.
Well, because if you think of going to school as a full-time job, basically you were working 7 days a week.
So pretty much I was. Yeah. Absolutely. And I hated school. I'd come back. There was one particular Tamworth festival. I was a guest artist with Keith Urban at Tamworth, West Tamworth in Blazers, and he had a midnight concert. And I was introduced on the stage by Keith and played with him and his band. And I'd come back to school. I was so depressed coming back from Tamworth festivals. I'd be crying in the car. Oh my God, I've got to go to school tomorrow. And I remember saying to I was in year 10 at the time, to my school friends that I played a gig at West Tamworth Leagues, a midnight gig with a guy called Keith Urban. Who's he? I still laugh at that. And I used to get teased actually for singing country music. Yeah.
Well, that was probably when Keith had his mullet still.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And then he grew out the mullet with the blonde surfy type messed up hair do. in the cut off sleeves. Yeah.
And I should also say you got a couple of golden guitars, I think.
I was nominated, not yet. I hope and pray that this album will get me some, but I was, yes, you're right. I was nominated for, so that was in 1995. I was nominated in a finalist in Best Female Vocal and Best New Talent.
Right.
Yeah, I think that year Gina got Best Female Vocal for the Flame album. But I was Gina. On that. I was doing backing vocals with Gina on that album, so I kind of got one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, as I said, you're working 7 days a week pretty much as a teenager. You've recorded your album. And as you said, you took a break. You took a long break. Part of me thinks, I'm not surprising because you might have been a little tired, even in your teens.
I think being so young and so naive and this is including mum and dad too, none of us had any idea how the industry operated, none whatsoever. And it was all like sink or swim, like trying to find our way. And I think what started to get me a little bit wanting to have a break was that I was taking everybody's advice in the industry, but it was polar opposite advice too. And I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea. I'm this little teenager that I just want to sing, give me a microphone and I'm good. But as you know, there's a lot more involved than that. The business side, we had no clue whatsoever. And I went to mum and dad not long after the album was released, the first album, and I said, oh, I just want to have 12 months break. And they were fine with that. In hindsight, mum has said we probably let you go a little bit too early and didn't research what we should have probably known. We should have researched some information before we let you go out with the album and everything. So there was a lot of that. And I just intended to have 12 months off. As you know, it turned into 30 years. And in that 30 years, people say, why? What happened in that 30 years? Why so long? And I look back and I've got a 14-year-old daughter and a almost 12-year-old daughter. So over that 30 years, half of that time has been being a mum. And then you go back before that, the time before pre-children, I just think life happened and there were a lot of wrong way go back scenarios. And I'm sure we've all had them. And I guess the timing wasn't right. There were just many twists and turns as there are in life. And I've never felt more excited or felt as strongly as I do now as far as timing. Even though I'll be 47 in November. But the timing for me, personally, musically, just everything is perfect. Yeah. And the girls are at that age now, 2 daughters, Shelby and Tilly. So 14 and 12, where they're not like little toddlers and, they're a little bit more self-sufficient. So, and I got a good kick up the bum from them too, saying, Mum, what are you doing? Which is a little line in Ain't Too Late to Start Again, where it says, and they said, Mum, you got to get back on the road. Yeah, which I thought was lovely, because I presumed that had come from your own life. And I guess now the decisions are yours. You've decided to re-enter at this particular stage, and when you're a teenager, events somewhat overtook you by the sound of it. And it's not as if the internet was around then and people could research easily. It wouldn't have, and if your parents had asked questions, people may just have not told them the truth. Absolutely. So it would have been very, very hard to know what the right thing was to do when you have a very talented child. They would have done the best they had with the information they had, I guess. They absolutely did. And they did an awesome job. But I lost mum only just over 12, February gone was 12 months that we lost mum. But they both did absolutely what they thought was best, and no regrets whatsoever. Like, there's not many people that can say their childhood involved playing with Keith Urban and supporting Lee Kernaghan on a tour, Troy Cassidy, even Slim Dusty, God love him. He played here in Port Macquarie back in the probably mid-90s, I reckon, and invited me to perform on his show. And he introduced me on the stage as his quote, the next best thing in Australian country music. And I sang a duet with his daughter, Anne Kirkpatrick. And it just warms my heart to know, I think I'm allowed to say this, Anne is actually going to sing feature backing vocals on one of the tracks on the album. She's coming through in a few weeks' time to go to the Slim Dusty Centre up in Kempsey, that she has a lot to do with, of course. And she's popping in to do some backing vocals on a special song. So,
well, if you find out that you're not meant to have said anything, just let me know and I'll edit this out.
I think it'll be fine.
But it's but you know, you said you're talking about the age you are now, and you know, young people wondering who you are coming into the industry. I think one of the wonderful things about Australian country music is you can be any age really, and have taken a break and come back, and you can still be the next best thing in country music.
Absolutely. There's been a few, and now off the top of my head, I won't be able to think of them, but there's been so many that have had, like, I know for Gina Jeffries, for instance, she had a big break. She had Jackie, who's now, I think he's a grown boy, but he's young, like maybe 20, if that, 18 perhaps. So yeah, a lot of them like take a little bit of a hiatus, and you're right, country music, like there's no, I don't think you start, supposedly you don't lose your voice until you're around 70. So if that's the case.
And Dolly Parton's still performing.
20 years left in me.
And now, speaking of Tamworth festivals, which we were, you played this year with Angus as part of his show. How was that?
It was awesome to get back on the stage, and I actually got invited also and accepted to attend the Golden Guitar Awards.
Oh, great.
Just gone, and it was amazing. Like the first few people that I ran into in the industry were like John Elliott, who's been in the country music industry for years and years. He was one of the first I ran into, and then I was just amazed at how many people I knew. I thought I'd be like a fish out of water, but to be out of it for 30 years and to learn that the people that were in it back then are still quite active in the industry, not just singers or performers, but just people that are, you know, publicists or managers, still active, even photographers that are quite known in the country music scene. It was really heartwarming, and that just goes to show that country music in Australia is really one big family. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's part of, you know, big part of the reason why I like to cover Australian country music. Now, I'll ask you one last question, which is to do with performing, and that is, with the album coming out in September, are you planning some tour dates?
That is definitely on the agenda, but we've got a little plan prior to that. I've got a big one coming up. We're actually having a pre-album launch on the 2nd of September, where albums will be available. Reason being, Angus will be out of the country on release date, the 16th of September. So we thought, why don't we have a pre-launch? So I'm going to be, that's going to be a big show that we selling tickets for now at the Bago Tavern out at Warhope. So that's going to be my first show as far as performing the album. And then we've got a little plan in place to actually start a little bit of a tour next year, hopefully, and festivals, of course.
Yes.
And hopefully some nominations for the next year's Golden Guitar Awards. Fingers crossed.
Given the quality of the two songs I've heard already, I think that you're a lock, and I'm so looking forward to listening to this album. Excited that it's not too far away. TC Cassidy, it has been such a privilege and a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, it's been wonderful too. Thank you so much, Sophie, for having me.
Thank you.